Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Stephen Pinecker, and look who's back in the house. Robert Messick of Book of Mormon Editions. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be with you again.
It's always exciting. I'm like your number one fan. This
Thank
is,
you.
like I tell people, this channel's for an audience of one. It's just for me. So anybody wants to come and join along, please feel free. And speaking of joining along, don't forget that the September book giveaway is my friend Brian Stutzman, who I interviewed a couple weeks ago, about his book, A Timeline of Joseph Smith's Prophecies, His Prophecies Fulfilled, by Brian Stutzman. Of course, he is a bishop at the Singles Ward in Rexburg, Idaho, which I imagine a lot of them are singles wards because it's primarily college students. And so he stopped by my studio a few weeks ago and he gave me 2 copies. So in the description is my email address. And when you do in the subject line, put in September book drawing and give me your full name and address, and we'll enter you in for one of 2 copies of this book. So, and the reason why, of course, it's September, and what's so significant about this September is that this is the 200th anniversary of the announcement of the coming forth of the plates. So I am doing this special Book of Mormon week here on Mormon Book Reviews. This will probably be released on September 21st while I'll be at the John Whitmer Historical Association. So make sure you say hi to me when you see me. And we're going to be doing also a special episode with, if all goes according to plan, we'll have a Richard Bushman's episode as well about his new book, Joseph Smith's Gold Plates. So we're going to have Book of Mormon week for the anniversary of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, which is actually interesting, Robert, because this series of dates have actually inspired you to kind of pursue a project. And I want you to tell us all about it. And this is what's so cool, folks.
Yeah.
Hold on. What was so cool is I got this. I'm going to cover my address. There we go. I got this letter. And it says the Book of Mormon Census Project. And I get this certification, authentication for my particular cool Book of Mormon, which is this guy right here, which we've talked about, was given to me, which includes, it's the best replica, according to Brent Ashworth, the best replica ever made of the Book of Mormon. And this one also includes 4 pages from the original Book of Mormon. And this was given to me by my friend David Hall. And so you sent this authentication to me, Book of Mormon Census. What are we talking about, Robert? What's going on here?
In the world. Well, yeah, and I love the energy. You and I get together and we just feed off each other's energy, and I love it because I'm super excited. And if you know my YouTube channels, I really have to focus on talking really slow, methodical, nice. And if you talk to me in person, I'm just like rubber bouncy ball was a description of me. So I really want to make sure that I've got some passion, but I'll slow down a little bit too. But you're right. This week is the 200th anniversary of Joseph Smith being visited by an angel to start the Book of Mormon, the Book of Mormon. So I've got a presentation for you, and I wanted to just jump into it and go into it regarding kind of the background and what we did. So let me screen share this with you, if you will.
Yeah, and just so you know, folks, Robert is actually going to be giving a presentation next month to the Book of Mormon Studies Association, actually in the church library. So very exciting. So this will actually be a little, actually, we're going to get a little more in depth here than what you're even giving at the presentation. So Robert's got this census project, and he's got this this PowerPoint presentation he wants to give the audience. So this is very exciting. You get for the first time, folks, this is the announcement of the Book of Mormon Census.
Yeah, so congratulations, Stephen. You are the first person that we will make this public for, and so because of it, exclusive on Mormon Book Reviews. How about that? Awesome. But yeah, September 21st, 22nd is the 200th anniversary of the 1823 visit by the angel to Joseph Smith. And so he was contemplating in his room. It was actually interesting, Sunday night, Monday morning. And so on a Sunday night, they're finishing up their Sunday or their weekend activities, and he's thinking about going to having to go on the farm on Monday, things like that. So he's sitting up thinking about what's going on, and he gets visited by an angel, and he tells this amazing experience that there's a record that's hidden a couple of miles south of his home. Go get it, and you're going to be an instrument in making this happen. So that morning, Monday the 22nd, he visits the hill. and also informs his family and parents. And his dad says, yeah, sounds like you got it. Let's support you in this. So it's really, I am so amazed because this is the 200th anniversary. So for the next 7 years, we're going to have 200th anniversaries for this, specifically also 1827. So September 22nd, this is interesting. Officially, it's just September 22nd. And I'm not sure if it's the night of the 21st, 22nd, or if it's the 22nd, 23rd. But they say it's September 22nd. What was also interesting is I'm an amateur astronomer, and I was kind of doing the moon phases of the restoration. And September 22nd, 1827 was a new moon, meaning if you look in the 1800s, or if you ever go camping, a full moon, you can do everything, read a newspaper, and a new moon, it's pitch black in the 1800s. And so it's in the middle of the night. He brought Emma in a wagon and buggy, and they separated. It was noted that Emma went back in the horse and buggy, and he walked back to his home. And the folklore also is that he was attacked by an unknown assailant, and he got away. And I was thinking, how do you not recognize an unknown assailant? How do you get away from being attacked and things like that? If you've got crickets in a bubbling brook, that there is a stream that he went up through, things like that. Noises is okay, but how do you not see? And the answer was that it was pitch black. And I was totally amazed that it actually was the new moon, which means no moonlight at all. So
okay. Now, just real quick, I just want to say something, Robert. I had the privilege to go visit Hill Cumorah while visiting Mormon History Association in Rochester, New York. I had no idea how big that it's a big hill.
Yeah.
So it's I just pictured it to be much smaller. Of course, it's a drum line, but much smaller than what I've seen pictures of. But it's a massive hill. So it's a really something to think about, Joseph, climbing up this hill, retrieving the plates, and considering how heavy they are too. This was quite an ordeal. I had no idea.
Yeah. And so he has to actually walk. I'm not sure the distance, but it is a couple of miles north to his home, and eventually secure the plates in his home. And so I'm glad that you experienced it. If anyone goes to Hill Cumorah or Palmyra, it's pretty inspirational there too. So for the next couple of years, then he has these plates, and finally 1830 in March. This was actually interesting. And the Book of Mormon was published for March of 1830. And then 1 month afterwards, the church was established. A good friend, Ryan Daly, does a presentation, and he says, what's interesting is a lot of religions have a significant leader or so. He preaches or talks and creates a religion based upon his teachings, and then they record the book afterwards. And so you have a book based upon a religion, and in this one is really different. You actually have a religion based upon a book. And so I was really impressed that the Book of Mormon was actually published before the church even started. So a little background is Book of Mormon was printed 5,000 copies, but what was interesting is not all books were bound. In fact, it actually took about 9 months for E.B. Grandin to do bindery on this. So if you look at actually 1830 Book of Mormon, the black title ribbon, the gold lettering on the title ribbon has actually multiple sizes and multiple text blocks for that particular ribbon. You can see in the center page, right? Right there, there's multiple copies or multiple ribbons, as well as the gold lines on the spine is actually irregular based upon who was binding at that particular month or so. So we know that over the course of time, there was mob persecution for the saints, and a lot of homes were burned and ransacked, which included a lot of these copies of the Book of Mormon were lost or destroyed. So in general, a lot of the book dealers say a 200-year-old book has a survivability rate of about 10%. So you're looking at what, 500 in this situation. So it's been interesting because of the YouTube channels that I have, I've got over 130 videos, but both modern and historical, both Salt Lake and non-Salt Lake. But what was really interesting is a lot of feedback that I've been getting is these early printings of the Book of Mormon are more interesting, not saying more interesting, but like really significant for all people to learn and know about and watch. And so we say that there's 5 volumes that Joseph Smith was involved in. Those are what we call the 5 early printings that Joseph Smith's lifespan was in. 1830 was Palmyra, 1837 was in Kirtland, 1840 was in Nauvoo, 1841 Great Britain, and many of them came back over to the United States. In 1842 was a reprint of the 1840, but it was considered a unique volume. And so those are the kind of the first 4, or excuse me, first 5 volumes. And so I've highlighted some of them on Book of Mormon Edition's YouTube channel. I'll give a shout out to my channel saying, go ahead and look at that, and look at those volumes as well.
And let's get Robert to 1,000 subscribers too, by the way, folks.
I'd love that. Thank you so much. But the number one question, not the number one question I get when reviewing these and things like that, and I've also started to ask this for some experts as well, is how many of these early copies of the Book of Mormon survive? And it's interesting because actually not many people know, and no one knows. So that's been now a new quest for me to say, okay, how many of these early copies of the Book of Mormon or unique copies of the Book of Mormon survive? And so we talked a little bit, I started kind of asking around, and the Book of Mormon is, let's talk about the 1830 Book of Mormon. The 1830 Book of Mormon is usually held by institutions like public libraries, church archives, both Salt Lake and other church archives have volumes, and then private collectors. So because of it, kind of like going through it, we went to public institutions and kind of started looking at them. What's really fun, and this is kind of the low-hanging fruit, is that most libraries subscribe to a world catalog. So instead of the little card catalogs, they're now all digitized, and they have all shared this. So WorldCat is the world catalog, or the library catalogs for all of them. And if you search 1830 Book of Mormon, this volume, you have to kind of sort and filter through to find that particular 1830 first printing, not a microfilm and not a reprint and things like that. There's 152 locations that I found. So that means locations, which means also that some of the locations will have multiple copies. For example, BYU has 6 of them. University of Utah has 5. What was interested is you can see Berkeley has 4 of them. I was like, how would you see Berkeley have 4? But I guess over time, a lot of times the estates are gifted to the university, and so they kind of just acquire them over time. The challenge is a couple of them, while we were researching this, a couple of them have been mislabeled. So we contacted a couple of them saying, hey, can you give us details, or can you give us pictures and provenance, historical details? And they pull it up and they say, oh, this is a replica. And it's like, okay, thank you. We'll change the description, things like that. So in general, my guess is in public institutions that are like public, about 200 to 250, which I think is pretty honorable, and it's a great stewardship for libraries to have these. Librarians are awesome. I'll give shout outs to librarians, because when I call them saying, hey, we're doing some research on surviving copies, they're like, oh, yay, it's about time. We're so excited. Let's give you all of the details. So I was really excited that they would show interest in this project around finding surviving copies. All right. Church archives is the other portion. This is all of the assets that are owned by a specific church. And obviously Salt Lake Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the major one. They have the Church History Museum, and they also have the Church History Library. Church History Library is where they hold most of the copies in their vaults, and the Church History Museum has displays and other artifacts of the church as well. But they do have several copies of the Book of Mormon, and then also visitor centers. When you were in Palmyra, did you see the E.B. Grandin printing office, and they've got a display there?
Yep, I certainly did. Yep.
Yeah, so church visitor centers. I know that there's a visitor center in Missouri. maybe a couple other places that they've got some displays. And so the displays are pretty interesting. Peter Crawley is a retired professor, and he went into church archives, and he was one of the first to describe and update their church archive catalog. Actually, the church, Salt Lake Church, has a card catalog or an online catalog, and he was the one that actually went through and organized and recorded the provenance or details of it. He recorded 37 of them, and I am told that since then there's been more donations to the church and more contributions to the church, things like that. And so it's anywhere around 50, that Salt Lake has. Same thing with Community of Christ in Missouri. Their church archives, it's been said that they have about 20, but it's also spread out through their visitor centers as well. So within church archives, we can say 75 copies of just the 1830 volume alone.
Hey, I'm just curious, have you been in touch with anybody from like the Church of Jesus Christ, the Biggershonites, to see if they have any first editions?
Yeah, shout out to Josh Gailey, really nice gentleman. He and I have been kind of coordinating other volumes and things like that. The Church of Jesus Christ in Pennsylvania doesn't have an 1830 in their church archives. I've been told that a private member has one, but I haven't contacted them yet. But I think they have other volumes that are worth noting as well. So
okay, cool.
And so yeah, those three: the Church of Jesus Christ, Pennsylvania, Community of Christ, Salt Lake. Those are the ones that have done a really good job in terms of keeping church assets safe and secure to make sure that they're for their membership as well. So
shout out to the church archives.
yeah,
Thanks.
they've been wonderful to work with and talk with. The private owners, let's say on the other hand, but the private owners have been interesting because they usually keep their information pretty private. And so it's really hard to quantify how many specific 1830 copies of the Book of Mormon are around, because they've had them either in their book for years or in their homes for years. I talked to one family that said, yeah, grandpa had it, and I think grandpa had it privately and beforehand. And so we've got this 1830 copy of the Book of Mormon, and we'll hold it. It's really funny. One family says, yeah, there's about 3 or 4 kids that have like 25% ownership of an 1830 Book of Mormon going forward. So I would imagine that inheritance and estate details, things like that, are certainly valid when you talk about an 1830 Book of Mormon, because you have such a beautiful asset that you have to make sure that you take care of that for a future posterity, but also understand like where is it going inside the family as well. So I talked to some book collectors as well as book dealers. Book dealers usually deal directly with private owners. And so because of it, their number has been around 300 personal, private owned Book of Mormon. So with that, church archives as well as public archives, you kind of get a sense of quantity. And so the challenge is nobody has actually done the research to combine these things. Public institutions know their own copies. What was interesting is I was asked a couple of questions by universities saying, hey, we've got this one feature. Is this common? And it was really interesting to collaborate with a couple of institutions. Same thing with church archives. Private ownership's been wonderful to talk with private individuals about their copies, and to make sure that they remain confident that they will have it anonymously, as well as have it for their posterity. So with the focus on the 1830 volume of the Book of Mormon, there has been other interesting volumes too. And so we wanted to do a gathering of information, and I wanted to make sure that it was academic rather than any kind of we hand it over to the church or we hand it over to a private dealer for them to be pestered. And so it was really interesting. One of the case studies that we looked at was, that I looked at was in the 1950s, they started researching the Gutenberg Bible and who had the Gutenberg Bible. And they did the study on that. They did a census, and the census is just gathering information to say, okay, where is it held? What condition is it in? And things like that. And they updated it in the 1990s. And so it was really interesting because the Gutenberg census was the case study that said, okay, can you create a census for a specific unique volume with that? On the other side, Rembrandt, the artists, Rembrandt, a lot of artists decided to get together and do an index for the Rembrandt paintings. And so they actually did an index regarding all of the paintings, both in private and public locations, and figuring out where it's at, what conditions it's in. And it was a years-long study of the Rembrandt index. And so we actually have that, and everyone can see the pictures of this Rembrandt index and all of the pictures of the paintings. And so you can have it in one particular location. So no one's ever actually done a Book of Mormon census before until now.
Awesome.
So we've launched a Book of Mormon Census project in commemoration of the 200th anniversary. And so I'm really excited that you'll let me do this for September of 2023, because we're starting now and going through 1830 to create a centralized location to help provide provenance and condition on various unique editions of the Book of Mormon. Specifically, these were the following, or the place, the volumes that we wanted to focus on, specifically 1830. As I mentioned, 5,000 copies printed, only a few hundred left, and spread out all over the place. What was interesting, Stephen, is that looking at the 1837, it was actually 3,000 copies. And I've shown this on my video. It was actually really small. And it was actually a pocket volume that was fit for either a breast pocket or coat pocket or satchel. And so what was interesting is no one likes a second volume or second copy. So those were actually heavily used up and discarded, or not say thrown away when used, but less than less of the 1830 volumes are actually of around compared to the 1830 volumes. So
interesting.
Yeah, and 1840 was in Nauvoo. 4,000 copies were printed, and I think the survivability rate on the 1840s is actually pretty high, because you only have Nauvoo, and then the Saints migrate westward, as compared to all of the bouncing around from Pennsylvania, from New York to Ohio to Missouri, and back and forth.
Things
so
tend to get lost if you're bouncing around, and travel. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're kind of excited to find a copy count for the 1840 Nauvoo's printing. But what's interesting is the 1841 was actually printed in Great Britain, and that was 4,050 copies. They did some reprints, and they did 1849 in the 50s, things like that. But we're dealing with the 1841, and that was the first Great Britain copy done by Brigham Young. But what was interesting is, consider this: it was printed in Great Britain, and so all of the 1841 copies that are found in America or the United States were actually brought over either by immigrants or Brigham Young or some of the leaders of the church. And so when you have an 1841, or when you know the stories of an 1841 copy, it meant that somebody brought it over. And so I'm just excited to hear and see the stories of the 1841 volumes, because it literally had to be transported from England. So
I'm just curious too, Robert, have you been in touch with any institutions in Great Britain, like universities and stuff and archives, that might have some there? That would probably be obviously the next step in that regard, right?
Yeah, it's next step. I haven't contacted, I'm not sure there's a Great Britain British World Catalog, but we contacted the British Library, which is the equivalent of the Library of Congress in America, and they actually gave us provenance and pictures of their copies.
Oh,
and
wow.
so we actually have the British Library's volumes that they gave us information for. So you're right. It'll be the next step is to contact universities and or research in England to find the 1841s that are still surviving there. So
cool.
Yeah. One of my interesting ones is the 1842 volume. Only 640 were ever printed, which is a really small print run. And what the challenge behind this one is, if you rip out the title page, it becomes an 1840 volume. It was lock, stock, and barrel copy of the 1840 volume with just a printing date change. And so it's interesting that if you have the title page, it shows an 1842 printing. And so very few of these will remain and are accessible. So I'm excited to kind of see these 1842 volumes.
I'm just curious, if
yeah.
you, I know that it's the same printing as the 1840, but would you be able to identify if the title page wasn't on there? That would you be able to make any distinction? Say, oh, that's probably an 1842 as opposed to an 1840, or is it pretty much like if it doesn't have the title page on, there's no way of knowing?
Yeah, I'll take it back. There are some experts that says I was told that the printing plates was transported over into Nauvoo, and the printing plates actually got dropped. And so because of it, a corner of the printing plate had a bend on a couple of its typeset or something like that. And so there is some quantifying marks that does show an 1842 volume. Also, the 1840 volume was actually printed either in series, and so they actually can determine what impression an 1840 volume was as well. I need to do a little bit more research, but I do know that there are experts that are willing to help me identify which is which. But the answer is yes. If you do have the 1842 title page ripped out, you can actually determine it, but it's really hard to do. Yeah. 1869 Desert Alphabet. I did a video on this that only 500 print volumes were printed. And think of it this way: in the Wild West, you have a new alphabet that was patterned after phonetic English that was done in Utah to help the immigrants come over. And what was funny is the story that I read was 500 were printed, and while they were in warehouse to be shipped out, there was a water damage for many of them. So even right in before they were distributed, there was some water damage to the set, and so very few remain, and what remains is damaged as well. So I'll show you a Desert Alphabet. May put a pin on this because the Desert Alphabet is a good one that I'll show about. And then 1899, you're going to the John Whitmer Association. This is interesting. The Whitmer family published a volume of the Book of Mormon in 1899 called the Nephite Records. Real quick, the history behind it was Oliver Cowdery died in 1850, and the printer's manuscript went to the Whitmer family. While they had it in the Whitmer family, they printed a volume of that. So it will be interesting seeing where these 1899 Nephite records are. And then honorable mentions. I did want to open it up to kind of show honorable mentions or some noteworthy ones. One of the volumes that I received or saw was one of the first Hawaiian Book of Mormon in 1855, one of the first language volumes. And so I was really excited that those, and the one that you showed, the 2007 letterpress edition, only 750, and they're numbered. So I thought it was really cool to kind of say, hey, if you want to give me details on those, we wanted to put that into the census as well. So pretty comprehensive. What do you think about the list of this particular census?
Well, I'm just curious about that one really rare Book of Mormon that we identified, which was our friend in Independence found that we did the episode on. That of course will probably be in the census, I imagine, because it's the only known copy, right?
Yeah, we'll put that in and do that. That's fun.
That's great. And that's based off the 1899 Nephite records. It's a very fascinating story. Check out that video. I'll have a link at the end of this video to that interview to check it out.
Yeah. The other one, another honorable mention, was a 1903 volume that was given by Joseph F. Smith to a senator while they were doing the polygamy, anti-polygamy laws and things like that. And one of the senators was at least favorable to hearing the Mormon details. And so it was gifted to a senator in 1903. So a lot of honorable mentions, kind of some noteworthy ones.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So the website is bookofmormoncensus.com. We're making this public as of September 23rd, September of 2023. And starting with this video. So I'm way excited. Once again, kudos to you for being an exclusive on this.
Yes, great.
And this is to commemorate the anniversary of the start of it. And the idea behind it is we wanted to really kind of focus academically on the copy count, really how many are are around and how many survive. They are really interesting to kind of talk about and see where they're at and kind of showcase these unique ones. And then what's also interesting is when I've talked to members of the church about this one, and I've talked with them about who had it or how it came about in terms of how it survived, it kind of is actually faith promoting. And I'm really excited that this does build some faith that, if you ever actually have an ability to see an 1830 Book of Mormon, either on display or personally, there's some electricity to them. And we call it the spirit that says you can really feel this thing. And I'm really grateful that this will give an opportunity for people to see, if they can't get to Salt Lake or if they can't get to a university, for them to see it and kind of have some faith building on this as well. So yeah, I'll make a push to say now that the website's public, go ahead and look at it. As mentioned, as we get more records and more details, we'll push to the website. And I really like having a website because as more records come up, it can be dynamic as compared to a static printing book or like a picture book or something like that. And now you're stuck with that printing. We really can make it this dynamic to publish more records as they come in.
Yeah, and just keep in mind, folks, I will have a link to that website in the description in the show notes. So make sure you check it out there too.
Yeah. So you want to see some fun ones?
Sure.
So this is now the show and tell of the census. How about this? We mentioned that some of the universities, when we contacted them, a lot of them didn't know what they had. And so they said, hey, we'll give you details if you can help us with that. We'd love to kind of talk about it, or we'll love to kind of show it, or love to learn more about this. And so the research back to them has been really grateful. They've been grateful and rewarding on our side as well. The first one is Reynolds Cahoon, not Calhoun. Cahoon was an early member and an early pioneer of the church, and he was really influential on giving copies of the Book of Mormon out. It's interesting because these were, not say rare, but because these were scarce, one person would read it, be inspired, join the church, and then give the Book of Mormon to somebody else. And so a lot of times you have multiple owners on this. And Reynolds Cahoon gave this particular copy to his mother, Mary. And it says, property of Mary Cahoon, given by her son Reynolds, who is a high priest and in the bishopric of the Church of the Latter-day Saints in Kirtland, Ohio. And so I'm not sure her details if she was a member or not, but it was interesting that she's like, yeah, my son's now in the bishopric to this new American church in Ohio, and I'm proud of him for at least doing something. So he gave me this, and I'm going to sign my name to it. So this is Mary Cahoon's volume, and when we sent it back to them, or we sent the details back to them saying this is what they got, they were really appreciative of this. So
just an observation on my part. Now I could be wrong, but the term bishopric is a uniquely Latter-day Saint term, as far as I know. So if she's a non-member, I don't know if she uses that term. So she at least to have been familiar enough with it to use the proper term. That's just my observation.
Thanks. Yeah. And so, yeah, and it fits perfectly because he was in the bishopric. He was a counselor to the bishop in Kirtland. And so for him to say, yeah, I'm a counselor to a bishop, it showed kind of the level of pride that a mom had for a son.
Yep.
Got it. This one will be interesting to you. Sidney Rigdon was a convert to the church kind of a couple of years after, or right in the beginning, but Sidney Rigdon belonged to a group called the Campbell'S. And the Campbell'S was a kind of a movement in Christianity. And Alexander Campbell and his father and his brothers was kind of the movement of the Campbell'S. And this one is Alexander Campbell's personal copy. And I thought it interesting that, another church would obtain a copy, or another leader of a church or a movement would obtain a copy of the Book of Mormon and kind of look at it, or at least put it on his bookshelf as a comparative analysis of what they're doing compared to what these new Mormons are doing, or something like that. And so this is actually Alexander Campbell's personal copy.
And what's so fascinating about this, of course, Alexander Campbell was one of the very first people to issue a critique of Mormonism, and in particular the Book of Mormon. So it's safe to assume that when he's quoting from the Book of Mormon or talking about the Book of Mormon, this is probably the volume that he's using to write his work. So very fascinating.
Yeah.
Are there any notes in there? Any underlined? Do you know of any annotations that he may have done in this?
The census will show, and I'll say refer to the census because it escapes me. A lot of these ones, and I would bet that this is annotated in terms of use the margins on either check marks or highlights or underlines, things like that. It doesn't. I'm really sorry that I don't know this. I should have known it, but I would bet that this is annotated and it's marked up as well. So
yeah, I talked with somebody from the Church of Jesus Christ who actually told me they went and saw this volume as well. So fascinating. Fascinating.
So what's also interesting is Bethany College in West Virginia. What we saw is there's actually a lot of colleges or like small universities that have copies in their rare book sections. And I was asking about it, and in about the 1930s, 1940s, there was an act of Congress that allowed grants and money to be provided to small universities, because the big universities had their own endowments, things like that. And in order for these small universities to not say compete, but to actually gain some footholds, Congress gave them money for the libraries to purchase and acquire unique and rare volumes and things like that, and basically just buff up and stack their bookshelves. And so a lot of these were actually purchased in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s under this act of Congress. And so it's very common that a college would have an 1830 volume or some kind of rare book in their rare books.
Do you know if that is a restorationist college, like affiliated with that church, with Alexander Campbell's movement? I'm actually looking it up on Wikipedia because I'm just curious if there's even a connection there. So keep going. I'll look it up. I'll find out. It was founded in 1840. Yeah, it was founded in 1840 by Alexander Campbell of the Restoration.
Yeah, and I think Bethany College actually has a lot of his volumes and a lot of his public things, and it was like endowed to Bethany College. So yeah, they were really proud of Campbell's collection to be part of their college.
Great. Well, interesting history.
So Principia College, this is interesting. They didn't know they had a Joseph Smith III signature on this at this university. When we looked at it, it says Joseph Smith in Plano, Illinois in the 1870s. And so because of it, looking at it, it's actually Joseph Smith III's signature. And the original owner was John Gould, and he inscribed his name in the title page. And John Gould was actually cousins to the Smith. And often, if the Gould family either passed on or something like that, Joseph Smith III had a privilege to probably collect a couple of these and then re-gift them out. And so this one was gifted to a Nicholson family from Joseph Smith III. And what's interesting is Plano, Illinois actually was the headquarters for the RLDS church in the 1870s. So it matches good. And it's just some validity saying that, yeah, he was in Plano, Illinois in the 1870s. So yeah, Joseph Smith III's volume that he re-gifted from somebody to another person. So
that's great.
This pronounce this name 10 times and you'll have a fun part about it. Dr. Hurlbut doctor was his first name. He wasn't actually a doctor.
Right. Exactly.
And you probably know this story even better than I do, but Pepperdine University in California has this copy, and it is Dr. Hurlbut, and he was an early member of the church. And I think in 1833 or really early on, he actually dissented to the church. And Stephen, you tell the rest of the story.
Oh, I often conflate him with other people, but yeah, he was one of the very first. He's the one that got all the affidavits together, right? Of people, the critics of him, Joseph Smith and stuff like that. So, and I'm because I'm a little tired. I think he wrote didn't he give us the Mormonism Unveiled book? Isn't
Yeah,
that? Yeah,
he
that's right.
contributed to Mormonism Unveiled.
So,
And
this was the first, like, I tell people, this is like the first anti-Mormon hit piece,
yeah,
if you will. And there was real bad blood between Joseph and him too. Like, I think if they were in the same room with each other, one of only one would have, like in the Thunderdome, 2 men enter, one
yeah,
come.
it really was a tragic situation. But
It
this one
was
is heavily annotated, and it is marked up in terms of the check marks and underlines and notes in this.
interesting.
What was interesting, what I like about this volume is in the end papers here, it is really scriptive. Dr. P. Hurlbut's book, Kirtland, and it's I can't pronounce it, Geauga County, Ohio. And so I was looking this up. It's like, okay, modern things, Kirtland is in Lake County. What's going on? And actually, Lake County was changed in the after the Saints left, and so actually the county is proper. It was you guys are going to tease me because I don't know this. Geauga County, Ohio. And so it's proper that he wrote it proper for that particular time frame, even though modern day it's Lake County, Ohio now. So.
And just so you know, folks, Pepperdine University is a Churches of Christ institution, so that is also a restorationist university as well.
Interesting, yeah. So we talked about the 1869, and this one is the one I wanted to show you because I was super proud and super excited about this one. They showed us an 1830 copy, and they said, yeah, we've got this one. Here's pictures of it. And I said, yeah, thanks for the 1869 volume. We're really excited about it. And I was looking. So this is, the inscription is Lizzie Sherman, Salt Lake, 1870, gifted by Joe Smith Apostle. And then it's a different script of Historian's Office in 1870, and then re-gifted away from Lizzie Sherman in the 1880s. So I'm thinking, okay, who's Joe Smith Apostle in 1870? And actually it's Joseph F. Smith, and he was in the Church Historian's Office. And so it was actually gifted by Joseph F. Smith. And I guess they called it Joe Smith back then too. So
Interesting.
yeah. So also Lizzie Sherman. Okay, so who's Lizzie Sherman? And I guess she traveled around and things like that. But looking at this, kudos to Brent Ashworth for helping me recognize this this script. He said, take a look at this again because you want to recognize Sherman as a last name. So I was like, okay, who's Sherman in the 1800s that's significant? And the Civil War general of the North is William T. Sherman.
Okay.
And so actually it's his daughter. And so this was given to actually the daughter of William T. Sherman, Civil War general. And to go even further on this, we actually did a handwriting analysis, and it actually is William T. Sherman's handwriting that he actually wrote this and gifted it to his daughter. And my speculation is that Sherman maybe visited Utah, and Sherman and Joseph F. Smith would probably be like important equivalents. And so Joseph F. Smith gave it to General Sherman, and then General Sherman wrote it to Lizzie Sherman. So when we contacted the university saying, do you know what you have? And they said, well, no, we don't. Who is this? What is this? And they said, and we said, well, it was given by an apostle. I don't think he was apostle back then, but but he was a church leader given to William T. Sherman to give it to his daughter. You've got Mormon history. You've got also Civil War memorabilia on this. And so this is actually General Sherman, General Sherman touched this copy.
Yeah, so this would be something that would be have cachet or collectability within the restorationist community as well as within the Civil War community. So
yeah.
two big groups. And just real quick, folks, did you know that Cheryl Bruno, one of the co-authors of Method Infinite, is able to read and speak, I believe, and read Deseret. So the Deseret alphabet. So she is forget the word I'm trying to use, but either way, she's conversant in it. So very interesting.
Bilingual in Deseret.
Yeah, bilingual.
So speaking of the Deseret, there's a university back east that was really interested in this project because they actually have a division or a department in their religious studies around the Deseret alphabet and its history. And they're trying to gather and collect Deseret alphabet details and kind of be a central location for Deseret alphabet. and they were really excited about this project. They showed us theirs and want us to keep involved with them on at least the 1869 portion of the census. So
I missed the name. Did you give the name of the institution, or would they rather not be put out there?
Escapes me. I'll probably put some notes a little bit later,
Okay.
but I think it was in either Indiana or Illinois that they were really excited about that. It's it's their division of the Deseret Alphabet. They're doing a Department of Deseret Alphabet on there. So I was really excited that, the academics are kind of wanting this to happen, and they're going to collaborate with us, or at least kind of piggyback to support this. So,
well, one last thing. You bring up Indiana, Illinois. So that's my background. That's my stomping grounds back in the day. And I'll have you know that there used to be a show on WGN radio, which is like the premier radio station. It's like the KSL, if you will, of Chicago. And I called into the Milt Rosenberg show. He had a late night call-in show. And and this was probably circa 2007, 2008. And I actually called in and talked about the Deseret Alphabet on that program, on the 50,000 watt blowtorch that covers most of the United States. This is how crazy of a person I am. So either way, I just thought I'd bring that in there. I just remembered that.
Yeah. Oh, great. To go to the census, the university that is the university that had the 1869 volume of the Deseret Alphabet that was owned by one of the Mormon Tabernacle organists.
Oh.
And so he inscripted saying, this is mine. And it was then later just understood, but he was very significant as a Mormon Tabernacle organist. So if you go on the census for the 1869 section, you can see their copy that's at the university there. So shout out to them that they own the one that was owned by the organist for the Tabernacle Choir. So University of Utah was really proud that they have got this copy. This is a Joseph Smith inscription, and there's not many and very few, in fact, extremely rare of a Joseph Smith inscription. And so this is the 1830 Joseph Smith inscription. He even misspelled Susquehanna and misspelled Pennsylvania, but they were really, really proud of this particular copy. It's really interesting because I went to Brigham Young University and University of Utah, and even libraries have a bit of university rivalry. That University of Utah will say, well, what does BYU have? And then BYU say, well, are you going to go to University of Utah too? But kudos to both of them. They've been wonderful to work with on both of them. But University of Utah was really excited that they've got this one. They've got the B.H. Roberts one, John Witzel one, and a couple others that was unique and significant enough to say, yeah, they're really honored to have a good collection in their rare books as well. So
interesting. And interesting, he misspelled Susquehanna in Pennsylvania. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah. So when we go to like church volumes, a lot of the good, not say good ones, but the noteworthy ones are on display in church archives. Church History Museum is just west of the Tabernacle. And I'll give a kind of a good shout out to say, if you want to spend a couple of minutes walking around, they've got amazing first floor library, and upstairs is also about the presidents of the church. But in the church library, one of their displays is the Phineas Young Book of Mormon. And this volume was actually given by Samuel Smith to Phineas Young, and then given to Brigham Young to read, or Brigham Young was inspired by this particular one because Phineas says, hey, you got to check out this new church and new religion and things like that. And so Brigham Young, I think Brigham Young had his own 1830 copy. So this is the Phineas Young copy, but it was part of Brigham Young's story. And so they were really proud to showcase this one, and it's worth viewing in the church history library.
Yeah, I checked it out. I didn't check it out, literally. I just went and looked at it.
Yeah. But across the street, or across from the conference center, is the church history library. And I actually just went there recently and experienced this one. And was it 2009 or so? Elder Holland did a general conference, and if you watch his talk, he picks up a Book of Mormon and he talks about the Carthage jail Book of Mormon, and this is Hiram Smith's Book of Mormon that was in Carthage jail. And I'll tell you, Stephen, I get a little bit emotional on this one, because if you truly, like, I was there looking at it and kind of took just a minute of time, and kind of the tears welled up in my eyes to see this particular copy. This one was with Joseph Smith Prophet and Hiram Smith when they passed in Carthage. And the story behind it is Hiram was reading in a page of Ether where Moroni is speaking, and he's kind of giving his last addresses, keep the faith and endure to the end, and you'll have blessings beyond measure and things like that. And he folded the page down, and the page is actually still folded in this copy. And so that was folded down by Hiram Smith. And what was interesting is Elder Holland looks it up and he kind of says, yeah, this page was folded by Hiram himself. And so to kind of look through the history and see this in the church history library, you'd be just numb if you didn't have some emotion or just kind of feel some tingles around this particular copy. One of my favorites, and I also was excited around the cover. 1841, the English and the British, they were known for really scripting and really designing and decorating their covers and things like that. So the 1841 is one of the more decorative volumes of these early printings.
And you did a video of that edition recently on your channel. And I also want to point out to two folks, just food for thought, speaking as an outsider. If the Book of Mormon is a fraud, why are Joseph and Hiram there last night reading from it and getting sustenance from it and getting hope from it, if they both were in on some kind of con? Just food for thought.
Thank you, coming from you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a solemn volume, and you can feel it. So thank you so much for that. So in private collection, so some of the private collectors have some unique ones as well. This is Oliver Cowdery's actually personal copy of 1837. Oliver and Joseph were involved in the 1837 printing, and the folklore is that Oliver personally bound this particular copy, and so he actually inscribed it in his gold lettering, Oliver Cowdery, and it's an 1837 copy. I wish I had a picture of it in my hands, because yeah, it's literally like this big. It's just a handheld one, and I have a hard time reading it. I gotta put my spectacles on. But yeah, really inspiring that this was actually Oliver Cowdery's personal copy, and it's in private collection, and it's now on the census. And I'm excited and honored that we can now have visibility of Oliver Cowdery's copy.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So the other one, the 1830s, if you do an internet search on this, you'll see actually Deseret News did a profile on this, and LDS Living and a couple other Salt Lake publications did one. This has actually changed hands a lot of the times, and this one was really interesting. It's Hiram Smith's personal copy that he gave to Reynolds Cahoon. So another name of Reynolds Cahoon again. This one is also interesting because Reynolds Cahoon gave it to his son Pulaski Cahoon, who either was not a member of the church or didn't go with the Saints West. He actually lived in Missouri, and he was a slave owner actually in Missouri. And when the 1860s happened with the Emancipation Proclamation, he actually freed his slaves and gifted his slaves like an endowment or some dowry to make sure that they could kind of get on their own. And he actually gave this copy of the Mormon Bible to his emancipated former slaves. And so the African-American family has had this in their possession, as they knew it was the Mormon Bible from their heritage for a long, long time. And I think it went to market in the 1990s. And so it's been changed hands quite a bit of times. Brent Ashworth had it in his 2008 catalog, and now it's in private hands. And if you search, you can kind of find where the owner is on this one. But I was really honored that they they'd have this one, and it's now the provenance in this one is really amazing, because they also asked to have the pictures of the African American family as part of the collection in this one. So if you see this book, you can also see the African American family that had this copy. So real inspiring. So what do you think about all of these volumes?
You did an episode on this one, didn't you?
Did, yeah. It was actually my 100th volume.
That's right. You know what I want you to do, Robert? I want you to send me links to all the episodes that we're talking about here, so that I could put that in the description as well. We'll share that with people.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Stephen, on the upper right-hand side, you see the title page there. And the title page, you'll see that there's kind of some crinkling or warping in these pages.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So what was interesting is this one is unique to this volume, but we had a university talk with me saying, hey, we've got this warping on these pages. It was a different copy. And so I had to go through all of the pictures of the title pages, and lo and behold, you can actually see that a lot of the submissions that we've received even already have this warping, and it's actually called cockling. And cockling is, imagine a newspaper being out in the sun for a couple of weeks. You have just like the warping and bending of newspaper paper, if you will. That's called cockling. Comic books have also the risk of that too. And so on a 200-year-old volume of a copy, this is actually happening on the first pages of these volumes. So what was interesting is the university called us or talked to me and said, hey, we've got this. If you're doing, examples of others, are we unique, or are we kind of, are we unique? And I said, no, this actually is very inherent of an 1830 Book of Mormon. And so what was also interesting is each one is unique, and it kind of creates a fingerprint, because you see on all of them, it's not uniform, similar shaping, but it almost creates a unique image for that particular copy.
No, and just to clarify, what's causing this to happen? Why is it just on the title page? It looks like on some of them, the other side has some warping too. What is going on? What's causing this to happen again? I'm a little unclear.
It's the aging of the paper and the bindery of it.
Okay.
Your pages inside are so tight that they don't have warping, but usually copies that are either opened or kind of loose on the cover, or at least not so much weight from just the cover as compared to the full text block, will age and or dry out and wear out. And so it kind of just creates it's the aging of the paper of that for that particular volume.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. But so right from the start, for even just a small sample of what we've had come in from universities and or other submissions, you can kind of see that it's kind of now interesting to kind of see unique features of specific copies now. So
yeah, that is interesting.
So one of the questions that I've been asked when doing this census, are we going to do textual analysis? And textual analysis says that, especially in the 1830 Book of Mormon, the typeset was done by movable type, and they printed it. And as they were printing, they found typographical errors, and they stopped the presses, changed the typeset, and then continued to print, but they used the old or the existing print material also. So because of it, there are typeset errors that were changed, or there's variations. What's interesting also is you have a sheet of paper that's folded into like 16 pages, and there were 37 of these sets of printings. So you have one stack, you have 37 stacks that you then collate. So what happens is maybe sometimes they find an error and they change it real quickly. Sometimes the error goes through all of the printing. And so to collate all 37 signatures or pamphlets to then bind and stitch up, every copy is unique in terms of the textual analysis. But we've already actually found the universities and private collectors that I've asked to get pictures of have sent us sample pictures of specific pages. And so we'll go through this. For example, in the preface page, on the back of the preface page, even before the text block, they did a Roman numeral 4 or a Roman numeral 6. And so you see on the left side of this is Roman numeral 4, but on the right side, they actually did change it and it's Roman numeral 6. So this is an easy one to kind of find quick because it's on the top of the page. You don't have to open the volume very hard. Everyone looks at the first few pages anyway. And if you're looking at the first text block of the iNephi page, it's actually on the verso side. It's on the other side. So this one's really fun to ask for, and you get a huge variation of Roman numeral 4 versus Roman numeral 6.
And the 1830 edition is the only one that has the preface in there, correct?
Yeah. So because of the last 116 pages, Joseph Smith did the preface saying what they did with the preface and why there's some confusion around not having the full volume or this volume versus 116 pages. So
is it page 4 or is it page 6? What is the proper number?
I think it's page 4.
Okay.
Because it's, how was it? Book of Mormon, backside, preface page, and backside of preface page. So it's the fourth printed page, but it's the 6th page if you include 2 end papers in it.
Okay.
And the end papers were actually part of bindery. So I'm not sure what's. Both of them are valid, but I think it's the 4th printed page because you have the the text, the title page, the back of the title page, the preface page, and the back of the preface page is page 4. So, but interesting that, some of these have the 4 versus the 6. So we talk about removable type. On page 144, verse line 36, there's an about that had an O in it. And you see on the left-hand side, it's I, Enos, went about among, and that's the page, and it's about. But on the left-hand side, it's an O. And it's kind of common. Imagine yourself as a printer. You've got, you're running pages off on a press, and then when you're done, you actually have to hand remove all the letterpress, all of the typeset, understand what it is, and put it in the right bin, uppercase, lowercase, and then when you're all done with that, you have to pull it back out and create a new printing plate. And so often some of these type letters would be in the wrong place. And so this O was in, I believe the O was in the A bin, and they just pulled an O and went into the A. So this is the about error, and half of them have an O, half of them have an A. So even page numbers had problems because page 212 is often listed as page 122. And most of them, actually, it's kind of rare for it to have 212 because most of the that I've seen is actually 122. It was even interesting on the lower right, you have somebody making an annotation saying a correction of page 212 on this. Most of the time it is 122, and very rare will you actually see a page 212. I think that this one, most of it got ran, and while they were on the back half, they found this and changed it. So this is the page 212 error. What was interesting is this is even and all of these variants are even in replica volumes. So a replica volume is based upon an 1830, and all of these errors are in replicas. So if you kind of go through it and pull out your replica, you can kind of see that this either has it or doesn't have it. So.
Oh yeah, it's great point. And it's interesting because you said it actually, the earlier ones had the misprint and then it was later corrected, but yet there's more of the incorrect number than there is of the correct one. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that tells me that the reason why we have more of the incorrect ones, because those are the early volumes, and the people who had the early volumes were probably people that would have been maybe closer family and friends and people, like loyal people, and they would have made sure that those would have been passed along. That's just me making an observation.
Good point. Well, the other challenge is you do have to print all of the volumes and all of your signatures before you go into bindery. So even if the early ones, or if the early bound copies had this or not, you still have to kind of print all 5,000 or all 2,500 sheets cut in half or so.
So mine is 122.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned that, yeah, this was in the later stages, because no one makes an error, and no one changes stops the process to make an error. So this one was corrected at the later set. But the next one is interesting because it actually is an error on the later set. And this is page 487. And the idea behind it is, on page 487, you have a page number, but over time, if you're kind of constantly printing and printing and printing, some of the typeset gets loose. And when you get stuck on a paper and you take it off, the typeset comes up and gets loose. And so page 487, a couple of them, or some of them, actually have a missing 7 on their page 487. So this is an error that actually would happen on the back side of the printing, or on the later part of the printing, as compared to a correction that would be done. So real interesting that, yeah, you have a loose typeset that's known or shown now as well.
Interesting.
So, and kudos to the typesetters. I don't think that I would be able to typeset 37 pamphlets of 588 pages total. But on page 521, almost at the end of the book or so, can you imagine as well, you've got a fixed block of printing block that's going to be this page, and you're trying to, you're trying to align the margins and things like that. And on page 8, you have a really long word called murderers. And so you're frustrated because you have to do a hyphen and wrap around the text, or wrap around this word. And so you do MUR-DERES. And sometimes on the very first, you're like, on the first set, he's probably frustrated. And so he actually does it backwards as RUM. And once again, keep in mind, when you're typesetting, you actually have to typeset backwards.
Exactly.
And so MUR is really easy to do MUR, not backwards. And so the rumderers, or RUM-derers, are a typeset error, and they found it saying, oh yeah, let's change it to murderers.
Kind of reminds me of Red Rum from The Shining a little bit.
My wife said the same thing. Oh, it's the red rum. So
great.
Yeah, so this one's not so easy to find, but this one's convenient to find because it's actually on the edge, and on the upper half of the volume, as compared to really opening the book and seeing something really deep inside. So
sure, okay, yeah.
And then this one is interesting. This one is actually extremely rare. It's line 10 on the witness page, and it's we testify that we have seen the engravings which are upon the plates, and the word seen, on the one on the right hand side, there's a triple E, and this is called the triple E error. And only of the of the volumes that I've seen, very rarely will you have a triple E on this. And so this was actually in University of Utah, but it's a triple E. And my thought is, the folklore behind this was that they were coming to the end of the printing process, and they said, yeah, there's textual typographical errors in it. We tried to catch them. We tried to, we didn't catch them all. There's some acceptability of some types of errors. And so they were on the end of it. And this one was caught. And I would imagine like Hiram, Joseph, and Martin Harris would come on a regular basis to kind of inspect the printing process. And they found this one, and they said, hey, this page is important because this truly is the testimony of everything prior. Can you make sure that you stop and do this one right? And so very few of the triple E scene is on this, because I think that they caught it pretty quickly and pretty soon. But real interesting that the witness page even has a textual variance as well.
Also, folks, just keep in mind, this is the 1830 edition. The witness page was in the back of the volume, as opposed to how they're currently in the front.
Yeah, so it's in the back, very last signature, or very last pamphlet that they're printing. They're kind of excited that they're finally getting done with printing. And this error pops up that they want to make it sure that there's a change. So those are some textual variants, even in the samples that we've got, and I'm really honored and excited that we've seen some textual variants. One of the academics was like saying, well, we want to see all pages of all books and all the textual variants and things like that. And I'm walking a fine line, because if I ask a private owner, hey, will you take a picture of every page of your book and give it to me? A lot of private owners will say, no, you're lucky to get a cover and a spine and maybe the title page. And so we walk a fine line between being too intrusive on saying, give us all of your textual variants versus not. But I think as we get better and better with the census and more collections, there'll be maybe about 5 or 6 that are really significant. The ones that I've talked with you about that will say, hey, would you give us these so that we can kind of have some good understanding on how many variants there are or things like that. So
Yeah, and even when you send them a letter or correspondence, you could even say, by the way, if these are things to look for in your Book of Mormon, and maybe give them page numbers and just give them so they can just themselves just go through it and let you know. At least you'd have that.
Yeah, I actually have a flyer that I've sent to the universities and private individuals saying, okay, this is what we're doing. This is our
Okay.
scope of work. And then if you want to take pictures, this is what we'd be looking for. And these are a handful of, variants that we're looking for. They've been really happy. Some of the universities are saying thank you because we now know what to look for. I referenced 1973, there was a BYU professor that did an analysis on textual variants. She viewed 70 copies that were in her access, and she kind of did that. Royal Skousen has kind of done 100 copies. I'm not sure what his status is on publication of that, but yeah, it has been limited in terms of looking at that. But it's I've also referenced the 1973. It's published by BYU Studies, and so if more people want to learn more about that, it's a good article to kind of get an understanding on what's there in terms of textual variances.
Other thing too, why don't you do this? Why don't you include on these links maybe a PDF of that flyer?
Mhm.
And then for those of you who are watching this episode who do have a first edition of the Book of Mormon, you could print that out and go through the list yourself and maybe get in touch with Robert. And we'll leave Robert's email in there too. I think that
Yep.
let's let them do the work, right? And save you some time.
Yes, please. And it's kind of interesting for the private owners. When I kind of told them, hey, look at this page, look at that page, they're like, oh, I'm so glad to see kind of this page or that page on what's unique about my copy versus anybody else. And so it's been really fun for the private owners to kind of, thumb through their edition and kind of get some honor and some excitement around what they hold as well. So
because odds are pretty good you're going to hear from people who have first editions who are watching this episode. So let's give them all the information out there, and then you can get in touch with Robert. Sounds great.
So to wrap up, the census project is held on bookofmormoncensus.com. And our kind of main purpose is to kind of assist libraries to collaborate together. I was really impressed, and I thought that I was on the right track when a university asked me, hey, does my title page have that triangular fold marks or those triangular cockling marks? And for me to kind of show them back examples was really kind of knowing that I'm doing the right thing on this. For church members, as well as for church archives, it truly is a faith promoting experience to kind of go through this and have people see, this was owned and this was touched by Hiram Smith. Probably in the next little bit, we've got access to Samuel Smith's copy of the Book of Mormon, which is Joseph's brother, who is one of the first missionaries. And the folklore is that he used his Book of Mormon as a pillow as he was his missionary. And so imagine that copy as well. And so, as mentioned, for private owners, I really want to make sure that they are understanding that their submission is in confidence, that they'll remain anonymous, but also be part of a great legacy. And I hope that as we continue through to 2030 and the anniversary of the Book of Mormon, this is going to continue to snowball into an amazing project for people to really kind of look at and filter through to see theirs, as well as what's available to look at as well. So
why don't you exit out of screen share real quick, and we'll wrap this up. So, folks, just to give you an idea, so Robert sent me the description, and of course these photographs I sent him, but he in many cases describing my particular edition. Again, it's not a complete first edition of the Book of Mormon, but it is a unique edition. And I always tell people it has 4 pages or two leaves, 4 pages, and I have page 116. So Don Bradley, I got page 116, just so you know. But this is a nice, cool thing. He has it stamped with an like authentication number, and so that's kind of what this is also. So as a private collector, I'm assuming every private collectors get something like this from you.
Yeah, we send physical certification to private owners as well as universities saying that this has been registered as a number such and such. The 1830s is the A series, the 1837 is the B series, and I think honorable mention is the H series. And so each one is unique to them. And I do kind of give like a little card or certification so that if it actually does pass hands or move to somebody else, that person can know that if the paperwork that paperwork follows the book, and then a new owner will know that it's been registered or certified, and also they don't need to let's say contact us, but they don't need to say that it's something new.
Robert, you know, one of the things I really love about our friendship and the relationship of our channels is that we've been doing this for over 2 years now. And I was a fanboy of yours for a very long time. Like I say, I can safely say it's the only channel where I watched every single episode. Of course, it helps when they're only like 3 to 5 minutes long, of course. But I've watched all your episodes. I think you're an invaluable resource. Now, you're a niche channel. You have less than 1,000 subscribers. Please, folks, let's get Robert to 1,000 subscribers so we can get him monetized, okay? So he can make some money off this. That's what he needs, 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours watched. So maybe go and watch his stuff in a loop so we can build up some minutes for him too, folks. Maybe also I recommend at some point, maybe we put this episode on your channel because it's long, and that will also contribute to more hours being watched on your channel, just making a suggestion there. But I think, you know, like with the exception of our Stick of Joseph episode, which, you know, got a lot of views, most of our episodes only get, you know, 500 to 700 views, which I'm fine with because I feel it's a niche thing. But this is the thing. It's 500 to 700 very important people because they're collectors. They're people in institutions that are watching it. They're geeks, total geeks who just love the thing. So the type of person that is watching this episode, maybe somebody has a first edition of the Book of Mormon. They didn't even know it. They're watching this episode. So for those of you who are interested in the subject of the history of the Book of Mormon, are interested in the Book of Mormon Census, again, we're going to have links in the description to the website. Check it out. It's an invaluable resource. And this is the thing. And what you're doing here, Robert, is this is like a 7-year project. Your goal is to really have, like, for over the course of the next 7 years, to really build out this website. So this is just the beginning of this project. Is that correct?
Yeah, and respectfully speaking, we would like to know all of the copies of these volumes. And it's a touchy situation because a lot of private owners are like, well, do I want to put this out there as that? And the answer is you can remain anonymous as well as be part of it, that we want to know how many survive, not necessarily who. And so I'm really honored that says, yeah, it's a 7-year project, and it's going to take that much time to gain the confidence as well as gain the understanding that a lot of people are going to look at this as we get closer to the 200th anniversary.
So this is all tied in as we are now counting down. This is a very important time period in the restoration because it's the bicentennial. So many important milestones within the restoration. Now really through 1844. I mean, just think about all the 200th anniversaries we're going to be having. So this is an important period of time that we're entering. Of course, we entered it in 2020 with the anniversary of the first vision, but this is an important decade. This is an important time. And of course, the Book of Mormon, I tell people, I said, you know, everything about Mormonism, I'm a Book of Mormon guy first and foremost. That's my wheelhouse. You know, I got Richard Bushman's book in the mail yesterday, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I ain't gonna have any trouble reading this book. By the way, I like I said earlier, if all goes according to plan, Richard's this will be Thursday the 21st. Will be this episode, and then on the 22nd, I'm interviewing Richard Bushman about his latest book. It's really fantastic. I love that kind of stuff. So, you know, this is the Book of Mormon period of time. This is when everything starts to come together, and Joseph is in training, if you will. It's a preparatory period of his life. That we're entering into the 200th anniversary. This is when Joseph Smith transitions out of maybe some of the things. He's in the period, he's in this unique transitionary period of his life from being a treasure digger, kind of a ne'er-do-well, some people might consider him to be a little bit, to now as he's becoming the realization of this mantle of the prophet, if you will, that he is developing and evolving. And also the importance of Joseph. Supposedly every year goes and gets instruction from Moroni. So, on the 22nd. So
And
this is
he's
just an
married.
important time. And he gets married. And he's there's so many things. And then, of
Yeah.
course, April 6, 1830, we get the start of the Church of Christ, later known as the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, or the Church of Jesus Christ, or RLDS, all these other groups who consider Joseph Smith their founding prophet, and their church was founded on April 6, 1830. And this is the thing, dude. Like you said earlier, the Book of Mormon came out before there was a church. So in one sense, the Book of Mormon's for everyone, and it's not just for one church. It's for the whole world. And I think you're doing your role in sharing the Book of Mormon with the world through your invaluable website. Robert, thank you so much for coming on. And do you have any final words?
I'm just honored to be here. This has been a labor of love, and I think that I've, in Sunday school, that's kind of funny. Everyone gives a testimony saying, well, I was called to be a teacher, and I've learned the most as a teacher. And it's true. As I've done this project in the YouTube series, Book of Mormon editions, learning that there's a lot of history and a lot of ability for me to learn, as well as I really want to emphasize it. A couple of times I realized that I should not throw rocks at the past restoration. Everything from Joseph Smith to Brigham Young to the pioneers to everything. I am grateful that I have something to hang on to, and I really am not a rock thrower, nor should we be critics of the past. One of the historians said to me that we've got an incomplete puzzle, and we've got pieces of the puzzle, and we've got enough to make a puzzle and enough to paint a picture, but we don't have all of the pieces of the puzzle, and we never will. And so because of it, I've been truly humbled to know that if I can bring some light to these volumes and to somebody else who wouldn't have it, that's great, as well as that it sheds some light that says, I need to be grateful for what I've got.
I'm going to make a prediction. My prediction is that over the course of the next 7 years, you are going to come upon something or make a discovery that's going to rewrite Mormon history in one sense. And maybe I have a feeling something big is going to happen. And I want to wish you Godspeed on your endeavor. I'm a fanboy first and foremost, but also more importantly, I'm a friend of Robert Messick of Book of Mormon Editions YouTube channel, and now the proprietor, if you will, of the Book of Mormon Census website. You're the bomb, dude.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you to all your viewers. I'm glad that you've got such a good subscription and glad a good base. You're doing awesome.
Thank you, sir. And just a reminder, folks, don't forget our merch store, MormonBookReviews.com, where you can buy merchandise such as hats and hot chocolate mugs and even mouse pads. You name it, we sell it. Either way, also for those of you who would like to financially support the channel, there are links in the description for Patreon, PayPal, as well as Venmo. Just remember, the most important thing is this, folks. Remember, and I just tossed my mouse pad on the floor, and so now it's all clunky. Remember this. The most important thing is this. All the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.